series. Magandang gabi po sa inyo lahat. Thank you for joining us again this evening. This is already our fourth of a series. So part of our efforts to put everybody abreast of things in our learnings in our craft for the moment that we are under some degrees of quarantine in our respective communities. This is through the kind efforts of our ever dependable and rock star senior grand lecturer, Very Worshipful Teddy Calao, and of course supported by yours truly and our very dependable Assistant Grand Secretary, Very Worshipful Oliver Yabut. This evening, if you have any questions, again, we will just go through the process. Questions are supposed to be put at the Q&A, not in the chat room. Okay, the chat room is for greetings, saying hi, how are you, etc., and nice to see you here, etc. But all questions relative to the lecture will be put in the Q&A. Okay, so please make use of the Q&A. And by the way, as soon as the lecture is done and then the Q&A is already being answered, kindly try to restrain yourself from putting up so much questions. But definitely our SGL is more than willing to answer all questions if necessary. But others, you may also send it to our SGL directly. He will be very generous at the end of his lecture to show us all his email address and how we will be able to get in touch with him. Okay. So this evening as well, for the information of everybody, this evening, unfortunately, our Grandmaster could not join us at the moment because signal where he is kind of slow. He's up in Central Luzon, and he is talking with the past Grandmaster and past officers relative to his efforts to renovate the Grand Lodge at this point in time. So he's getting commitments there, and he's being supported there. And hopefully he will actually right now. He told me before coming into this webinar, he told me he's successful actually in getting support for the renovation of the meeting rooms at the Grand Lodge. So if you can eventually at the end of the term, hopefully we will be able to be seeing different facade and different feel of our Grand Lodge meeting rooms, that are being used at the Grand Lodge at this point in time. We have close to 600 registrants in this webinar. Okay. And this is also being supported by our cable tow team, ever dependable cable tow team, headed by, of course, by our editor-in-chief, Kuya Harold Santiago, and he is being supported, by his team. The person who is making this broadcast actually is Kuya Alberto Dumlao. So they're doing a good job in working this out together with the other cable tow team, Kuya Anthony Tan and the others. So Kuya Harold and team, thank you very much and for doing a good job, and hope our webinar series this evening will be a very fruitful one once again. So for tonight, brethren, as sent out and circulated, we will be having our Masonic history. The topic will be about the Masonic lecturer, his role and functions from antiquity to today. Okay, I think this is another very interesting topic because we have not yet started, but I'm already getting a lot of queries in our Q&A. So please hang on. Later on, I try to answer a few, maybe 2 or 3, but the others, you hang on and wait. it will be answered later on at the end of the discussion. Most likely, some of your questions will be answered. Tinatanong kasi nila, Kuya Teddy, bakit daw hindi na nila na-feel yung mga DGL? Eh, sabi ko, wala naman tayong works ngayon. And if there will be a new like set of lectures that will be coming out, I said most likely. So to start off the evening, hindi pa pala, we still have 1 minute. After mga we'll start in around 7:05. Just so we will let the others come in. We already have 100 attendees, 102 attendees in this webinar now. And most likely we'll be getting more. Kuya Teddy, which one are you going to use for your slides? The other?
The one with the full name.
Okay, so I can...
Before we start, Kuya Dennis, for those who are wondering why we don't have stated meetings and BGLs doing Masonic education in stated meetings, that's because of the suspension. But this week, for those who are wondering, we received the official communication from the United Grand Lodge of England. They are going to start physical meetings under what they call the Rule of Six, wherein they do everything via caucus outside the meeting, and then have a formal meeting with 6 brethren, so that they can do it live. So we're looking at that because that's persuasive on us, because as you know, the United Grand Lodge of England is the mother Grand Lodge of the world when it comes to regular Freemasonry. So we may look at the fourth quarter having limited meetings, but that's up to Most Worshipful June, subject to our study. So look forward to that, brethren.
Nagbukas na, Kuya Teddy, ang United Grand Lodge of England?
In a limited sense. For up to 6 people. I'm sorry, up to 6 brethren.
Wow.
Okay.
Kuya Teddy, before you start, we will hear Assistant Grand Secretary, Very Worshipful Oliver Yabut, to read the message of our Grand Master for this evening. So.
Okay, but you want me to drop this first?
Kung pwede, para si Kuya Oliver.
Okay. It's okay. Good to go.
I will highlight him. So very worst. Okay, it's 7:01. So again, good evening, brethren. Welcome to our webinar series, fourth of our series now. And thank you for joining us this evening. There are like 125 now. We have around 600 registrants, so a lot of brethren are still coming in. Another very interesting topic this evening. So to start off, again, our Grandmaster would like to extend his apologies for not being able to join us this evening, as he is still in Zambales, and signal where he is not as good as it's supposed to be. But he is already extending his greetings to everyone, and he requested Very Worshipful Assistant Grand Secretary Oliver Yabut to kindly read his message this evening to start off this webinar series. So without much further ado, Very Worshipful Oliver, sir.
Yes, thank you, Kuya Dennis. Can you hear me out? Okay.
Yes, it's good.
It's good. All right. Good evening, brethren. I have the honor to read the message of the Grand Master for tonight. And I quote, "Brethren, once again, I have the privilege of opening our continuing GLP webinar series, this time dwelling on the importance of the Masonic lecturer. While we cannot meet yet in our lodges, we must ensure that the brethren continually receive vital Masonic education. The Grand Lodge does its part through the webinar series as managed by our senior Grand Lecturer, Very Worshipful Teddy Callow IV. We also have launched online the prescribed courses offered by IMES. The lodges can also do its part. I learned that some lodges make it a point to offer Masonic education to members during their monthly Zoom caucuses. This should be the norm in every online interaction of lodges. I therefore urge all worshipful masters to make this a regular practice. I am sure that lodges have qualified lecturers in its ranks who can do the job, and I am confident that after this webinar, you will gain additional knowledge on the subject. I am also happy to note that despite the lockdown, some of our lodges managed to do some badly needed charity works for COVID victims. Now more than ever, the world needs an abundance of charity. And as members of a benevolent and charitable institution, we must all do our part. We must not remain silent and idle because there is a lot of positive things that we can do while on lockdown. Just recently, I have formed a special Ways and Means Committee which shall oversee the repair and rehabilitation of our halls in the Plaridel Masonic Temple. And I refer to the Stafford Hall, Bonifacio Hall, and Palma Hall, all located in the fourth floor of the Grand Lodge. They are in a sorry state and have not been repaired for a long time. Very worshipful Jaime Pacanan agreed to head a 15-man special committee which is charged to turn these Masonic halls into structures of strength and beauty. By the end of this year, or possibly by November 30th at the earliest, we can see the fruits of this effort. Decent, orderly, and inspiring meeting places of Masonry, which will be conducive to our mission of creating better men. The sad reality, however, is that we do not have funds for the purpose. We must rely not only on the dedication of very worshipful Pacanan and his team, but largely on the support of our brethren in the jurisdiction. Every Masonic temple is built for the benefit of all Masons. We should all own this effort. We should keep all Masonic temples in good order. I appeal to you all, brethren, to please support this worthy project. In the same manner, I will support all efforts of lodges to repair or refurbish their temples and Masonic centers, and this should be done while these lodges are not being used for the time being. Let us all use our downtime productively. Brethren, we are now in the end quarter of the year, but I have to be candid with you that we are still uncertain as to when we can resume our meetings and labors. Public health and safety is the main consideration, and our decisions depend largely on the official pronouncement of government authorities. For the time being, we shall maintain the status quo. All meetings are still suspended, and all incumbent officers shall remain in their respective positions. You will also agree that there is also no point at this time to having our annual election of lodge officers this December, and this we may have to cancel as well. Please await our official circular in this regard. In the meantime, keep safe, brethren, and let us now listen to the very important topic we have on hand. Thank you and good evening. Unquote. That is all, Kuya Dennis.
Thank you very much, very worshipful Oliver Yabut, for reading the message of the Grandmaster this evening. So, brethren, you have heard the message of the most worshipful Grandmaster, who unfortunately cannot join us this evening, but I think he is monitoring what is happening now. He just could not check in as a panelist, but he's listening because he's in Zambales right now. Yeah, as he said, he had created a special committee for Committee on Ways and Means, and they're gathering resources to work on our buildings in our structures at the Grand Lodge. Okay, so to each and everyone again, good evening. So now let's proceed to the meat of this discussion. May we hear now the lecture about the Masonic lecturer, his roles and functions from Antiquity to today. Our senior Grand Lecturer, very worshipful Teodoro Carl Defort. Sir?
Thank you, very worshipful Dennis and very worshipful Oliver. Good evening and good day, good morning to everyone across the world, particularly our brethren here in the Philippines, Japan, Okinawa, Korea, Marianas, the Northern Marianas and Guam, and to all of our guests today who are tuning in to listen to, who want to find out more about what Masonry is about across the world. We are very touched that you could join us this evening. For the third topic that we have today, we will be focusing on Masonic history. And in this regard, we are going to look at the role and functions of the largest number of Grand Lodge officers. They're your core of Grand Lecturers. And for many of us, we necessarily have to ask, what do they do? Uh, if there's so many of us, there are like over 200 district grand lecturers, about 23 junior grand lecturers, and then you have the senior grand lecturer. What do they really do? So if you look at our, can you see the screen now? Kuya Dennis, can you see the screen?
Yes, Kuya Teddy. We can see the screen. Yeah. Sandali ah. Ano nangyari? Nawala ba sa'yo, Kuya Teddy?
Okay. No, it's on now.
It's on now.
My
Oh.
mistake.
Okay.
Okay, so what are we going to focus on today? Essentially, we're going to really look at three points. First, what do Masonic lecturers do from the perspective of history? How did the office originate? Based on how did Freemasonry originate? Okay, and then we're going to go quickly to the development of that office over time. Different jurisdictions, you will see, have different concept of what a Masonic lecturer is. At the bottom of your screen, you will see that in the United Grand Lodge of England, they have a different concept of what a Masonic lecturer is. Here our primary concept of Masonic lecturer is somebody who instructs on not just the ritual, but for those of you who are not in Freemasonry, quote unquote, esoteric work. In the United Grand Lodge of England, which is the mother Grand Lodge of the world, they do not have a senior Grand Lecturer. What they have is a Prestonian lecturer, and that is an appointment made every year by a brother to do a specific lecture. So it's not just supervising the work. In England, the concept is very different. It's someone who provides a specific lecture to different lodges during that term. Okay, so how did this come about? So we'll go into Masonic history for that. That will allow us to springboard to what do over 200 juniors and your SG, because they compose the bulk of all our Grand Lodge office. And you might want to ask if you have a particularly non-active Masonic lecturer in your lodge, what is he supposed to do? This is your benchmark. That will allow you to ask if you know the importance of the office. That will hopefully allow you to ask yourself, should you aspire to the role? Not to the office, but to the role. Okay? So we'll end with that. What's in it for all brethren? Because they say that becoming a Masonic lecturer, whether it's DGL or Junior Grand Lecturer, it's a position that's readily available because we need a lot of brethren every year. So while the office can readily be sought and received, okay, what many brethren miss out is that it's not the office that's important. it's the role that we're gonna talk about today. Okay. Again, I'm going to do my usual caveat or warning. After this lecture, which is about 90 minutes long, you will not be an expert on Masonic history after this. Okay. The Institute of Masonic Education and Studies is already doing their online program. I strongly encourage you to join their runs this year. That's not covered. Masonic education is not covered by the suspension. Stated meetings and work are, but Masonic education is not covered. So please, if you can attend the next online class, these lectures are meant to supplement the diploma program that we have there. So I encourage you, for those of you who haven't done yet or are already in the craft, to please go. Okay. Having said that, take note. Uh, there are different concepts of what a Masonic lecture is. Not all jurisdictions have grand lectures. Okay, we will find out what that concept is tonight or today or this morning, wherever you are in the world. Okay, so in a nutshell, three topics. What are the origins and three traditional roles of Masonic lectures? How are they exercised today? And in particular, how do we distinguish them from the only officers in the Grand Lodge of the Philippines who are not appointed but commissioned? What's the difference? When you're a commissioned officer, you receive a specific document called the commission, which highlights your roles and duties. And the only commissioned officer in the Grand Lodge of the Philippines are what we call Grand Lodge inspectors. All other Grand Lodge officers are elected or appointed. They receive commissions countersigned by the senior Grand Lecturer and duly signed by the Grand Master. Okay, so what's the difference between their role, Grand Lodge inspectors, and Masonic lecturers? We'll find that out later. And hopefully, after you go through this history and you understand the importance and significance of the role, then you might ask yourself, is this something I'd want to do? Okay, I'm not talking about the office. I'm talking about the role of being a Masonic lecturer. In that regard, if you see on the slide here, you will see the first and foremost guru among senior grand lecturers. That is our current Grand Secretary, Most Worshipful Danny Angeles. He was a senior grand lecturer uh, for I think 3 times in the 1980s and 1990s before he became Grandmaster. We call him the guru of all SGLs because SGLs might have different interpretations of different Masonic rules or traditions, but he is the final word. Okay, so if you want to aspire for the role, that's your idol in or that's your model, and in that regard, below him you have the traditional apron of Masonic lecturers. All Masonic lecturers have that, the crossed rods. These are they are symbolic of the three traditional roles that we are going to discuss today. Before we get to that, we have to know, okay? We have to know. We have to have some inkling of what these roles are, right? So that leads us to our first poll question. Okay? I can tell you now, brethren, all of the following are included in the traditional roles of Masonic lecturers, except one. Ano kaya yun? Okay, so what are all of these are roles that are part are functions that are part of the traditional roles of lecturers, except one. What could that be? Is it A, assess and certify as to one's proficiency in Masonic work? Is that something a lecturer should do? Doesn't appear to be part of education. Maybe that's the one, right? Or is it B, instruct on lodge governance and Masonic traditions? Alam ko Masonic traditions pero lodge governance? Baka trick answer yan. Okay? Or is it C, interpret and enforce Masonic laws and regulations? Hindi ba Grand Lodge Inspector yun? Maybe it's C. Or is it D? Demonstrate and regulate the appropriate performance of Masonic work. What does that mean? For those of you who are not in the fraternity, what does that mean? Performance. Is that something that lecturers do? Okay, brethren. Let's see what your answers are. Kuya Dennis? All of the following, as you will see during the lecture that follows, are part of the traditional roles of lecturers in the craft. Except, what's your answer? Wow. Seems a lot of you are changing your answer. When we close the poll, that's the final it's the final answer, huh? We now have 178 brethren and guests in attendance. We just hit the 50% mark. Maybe we'll have 1-2 minutes more. I hope you don't mind, those of you our international viewers, that I lapse into Filipino. Makes it more fun. Uh, I'll try to translate it to English, those particular portions. Oh, those of you, please stop changing your answers. There is no, this is, you're not gonna pass or fail. Okay, so just pick an answer. No need to keep changing. I know. Yeah, I guess you know from our previous webinars. This could be a trick question. So it's deliberately phrased to get your answers. To have a variety of perspectives from all of you. Okay, Kuya Dinas, we have 70% to have voted.
Okay, we'll end the poll now, Kuya Teddy.
Okay, let's see. Let's see what the results are. 10 seconds.
Share the result.
Okay, launch the results. Here we go, brethren. All of the following are part of the traditional roles of lectures in the craft, except there are those of you, 13%, who answered B and D. Okay, I can tell you that clearly, if you got my answers earlier, that demonstration and regulation of Masonic work, which is a ritual, that's clearly the job of lecturers, right? Also to do instruction. And if you look at our Masonic law book, if you're very familiar with that, you will see that it not only involves Masonic traditions, esoteric work, but also lodge governance. Not Grand Lodge governance. Huh? We have absolutely no authority to talk about, for example, Grand Lodge elections. But traditional norms of governance in the lodges, that is part of our duty of instruction. Now, you will see also later that Masonic lecturers, we have certification functions as to not just elect newly elected officers, but also, for example, proficiency of those who have finished the third degree and need to do their proficiency exam. Also, the senior grand lecturer also has to endorse and certify all Grand Lodge inspectors. So clearly, those of you, the 30% of you who said A, you will find out later that is a little known part of our work, but it's a very significant part. Okay, so that leaves us with C. For those of you who believe that Grand Lodge lecturers or Masonic lecturers are not uh, Grand Lodge legal officers, you're correct. It is not the duty of Grand Lodge Masonic lecturer to interpret the laws. They can provide you with advice, but take note that that advice, as you will see later, is not meant to be definitive. Okay, what are the reasons for, or the when should you get a query from on, for example, Masonic laws and regulations as compared to esoteric work or lodge governance. We'll find out more later. But for those of you answered C, congratulations, you're correct. Okay? So that, and I'm happy that more than 50% of you were able to get it right, because you at least have an idea, therefore, of what Masonic lecturers really do. Before we go into the roles, okay, let's go into the distinction between uh, free, ancient, and accepted Freemasonry. What does that mean? Okay, we have to go into this because if you, uh, this is the reason why we have different concepts of lecturers. Okay, for those of you who are not in the fraternity, there are actually two major kinds today. Two major kinds, not three, of Freemasons, and we're all together in the craft. Freemasonry started out as Masons who deemed themselves free. Who are these kinds of Masons? These are Masons or craftsmen who actually build cathedrals. Okay? But their perspective when they work on stone or when they work on the materials to build new buildings, when they build materials to build the new buildings, it's not just working on the materials. Their focus is to actually build that building. Could be something as grand as a cathedral or as humble as a home. But essentially, what free, quote unquote, Masons do is essentially in the Middle Ages start out as a trade, where then they got apprentices to mentor, to assist them so that they can begin building, so that they can do their craft. And over time, this philosophy of mentorship, this philosophy of teaching those who are coming after you, non-Freemasons, and I'm not talking of Freemasons, but those Masons who are not actually members of the operative guilds, they got to appreciate this approach. So that eventually over time, in the 1300s, 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, you got more and more non-Masons who are members of these operative guilds joining, and those Masons are deemed accepted Masons. They were accepted to the guild because the guilds were beginning to develop a distinct secular philosophy on how to personally develop as a professional, okay, through mentorship. And as more and more accepted Masons came in over time, they became to dominate the fraternity. So that it was not just a question of personal development, it became also a facility for fellowship. And again, the focus also on continuing mentorship. This culminated on June 24, 1717, when four lodges of free and accepted Masons gathered together in a tavern in front of St. Paul's Cathedral in London. Okay? If you've ever been to that beautiful cathedral in the city of London, in front of that is an office building. The tavern is no longer there, but there is a historical plaque. This is Masonic history. There is a historical plaque that you can get your, if you are a brother in the United Kingdom, you better make sure to get a picture of yourself in that plaque, because when you're in front of that plaque, you are standing on the birthplace of institutional Freemasonry. Not Freemasonry itself, because Freemasonry has been around since time immemorial through the operative guilds, but institutional Freemasonry. Those four lodges on June 24, 1717, the feast day of St. John the Baptist, they got together and modern Freemasonry happened. as an institution. It occurred, they organized themselves as the first Grand Lodge. What you see at the bottom is an example of an accepted Mason. That's George Washington, the first president of the United States. Okay? Uh, like many who are not in real estate or the building trades, okay? He's an accepted Mason because he joined because of the philosophy. Is this important? Is this distinction crucial now? Is it a major distinction now? Not really. Okay, there are those of us who are in real estate who can consider ourselves Freemasons, whether you're in construction or in real estate, the various professions related to real estate or built environment. But whether we're in that profession or not, we are Freemasons. But the reason why the Grand Lodge is called, or for the Philippines, is called Free and Accepted Masons is because of this distinction. Historically, from the guilds of operative Masons, those who actually work on stone to build buildings, a philosophy developed so that others eventually joined in, became the majority. Those brethren were accepted into the craft to build this secular philosophy of personal development, founded on personal development and fellowship through mentorship. Okay? And it's secular in the sense that it focuses on your system of ethics, not your faith. But it cannot be divorced from your faith, as if you enter, you will find out. Okay? Now, in some jurisdictions like Pennsylvania, you will notice that the title of the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania is ancient, the most honorable and ancient Grand Lodge of Free and Accepted Masons of Pennsylvania. Other Grand Lodges have the words Free, Ancient, and Accepted Masons. Why doesn't the Philippines have that? Because a form of accepted Masons, whom we shall call the Ancients, they split from the 1717 Grand Lodge and formed their own Grand Lodge called the Ancient Grand Lodge sometime in the 1730s. Okay? Kind of curious, because they call themselves the Ancients versus the modern Grand Lodge. Because of the fact that they felt that the philosophy, the secular system to improve yourself, should be more spiritual in nature. And that is why they felt that in addition to the 3 degrees, it's essential that the ritual will include, for those of you who enter, you will find out, what we call the royal arc. Royal arc symbolically is, this is a symbolic philosophy, symbolically highlights that you cannot divorce ethics from nature. Your religion is always the core of your ethical beliefs. And because of that, because of this distinction in how the philosophy should be practiced, you had 2 Grand Lodges, but eventually, on the feast day of Saint John the Evangelist on December 27, 1813, they eventually got together and formed the United Grand Lodge of England. Okay? So, in that period between the 1730s and 1813, you had 2 Grand Lodges in England who were issuing warrants to form lodges. The ancients, the ones who believed that the 3 degrees include the royal arc, highlighting man's spiritual nature, the ancients got to organize what would become the Grand Lodge of Pennsylvania. That's why the Pennsylvania Freemasons call themselves Free, Accepted, and Ancient Freemasons, right? But the moderns, the one from 1717, or ironically, the first original modern Grand Lodge, they got to organize the lodges that would become the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts. Okay? And therefore, the Grand Lodge of in the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts, if you look at its full name, it's just free and accepted. Lodges from the Grand Lodge of Massachusetts would form the Grand Lodge of California, and 3 lodges from the Grand California, if you remember our lecture in Masonic history last June, they would be formed here, and those 3 lodges would get together and form the Grand Lodge of the Philippines. Okay? So that's why we don't call ourselves ancient Masons. It's not that we're not. We are, because we recognize the Royal Ark. But unlike in England, where the definition of Freemasonry, because the Church of England is a merger of the moderns and the ancient, is the 3 degrees plus the Royal Ark. Here, our definition of Freemasonry is the craft lodges. But we do recognize, you see the symbol at the bottom, the Royal Ark, in what we call one of our 2 major appendant bodies, the York Rite. So you can receive the Royal Ark in the Philippines. You can study that in what we call the York Rite. Okay. I'm always asked this question. Wow. If you look at the formation, first you have the modern lodge, the first modern Grand Lodge, founded on June 24, 1717, on the feast day of St. John the Baptist. And then you have the merger on the feast day of St. John the Evangelist, December 27, 1813. Is there something, is there a reason for that? Okay. We're going to get into the topic later, brethren, so bear with me a little more. But this is important. You have to understand the distinction. In short, from Freemasons, accepted Masons joined to develop the philosophy, and a branch of those accepted Masons spun off to highlight that the philosophy centers on your spiritual nature. They're called the Ancient Masons. Eventually, the free and accepted Masons merged together again with the Ancient Freemasons. That's why in those Grand Lodges that were formed by the Ancient Masons, they're regular because, they were formed by Ancient Masons, and therefore their titles are free, accepted, and ancient. While for those lodges that can trace their origins to the modern Grand Lodge founded in 1717, we follow the traditional title of Free and Accepted Masons. But now we're all just one big regular Masonic family. Having said that, since now you know the distinction since you know the distinction between free and accepted, you'll see therefore that methods of instruction differ between these 2 major arms of Freemasonry. In operative Freemasonry, the point of instruction was to communicate trade secrets. Okay, so that you can become an apprentice through mentorship and eventually be admitted as a fellow of the operative craft. And when you become a fellow, you are deemed to be recognized as a fellow with your master's mark. Originally, there were just 2 degrees of Freemasonry, entered apprentice and Freemason. With the onset of the Grand Lodge, the institutionalization of the Grand Lodge, we eventually developed to have 3 degrees. But eventually, if you become a fellow in the operative system, you get your own mark. That's different from eventually with the institutionalization of the fraternity as a secular system to develop oneself, to better oneself by being mentored and in fellowship with others. That's totally different. Because there, speculative Masonry, the focus now is on what do the rituals teach us? What do they symbolize? So there, the instruction now goes not into how do you build a cathedral, how do you build an actual cathedral, but How do you build a cathedral in our hearts, in each of our hearts? It's one of the most beautiful ethical philosophies if you get into it. And therefore, there had to be specialists who had to teach this philosophy. Okay? One of those who achieved renown was William Preston, who, in his illustrations of Masonry, sought to explain the development of the ritual then in 1813. Okay? When the United Grand Lodge of England merged, they also orally approved what would be accepted ritual. What's the distinction between what they approved and what we do in the Philippines is important, because what the United Grand Lodge of England approved was you can do, for those of you uh, outside it, you cannot print it. So all instruction was oral, and William Preston, in his day, a very popular work is his Illustrations of Masonry. The of it in the United Grand Lodge of England to orally through lodges of instruction. So, because of that oral tradition, okay, where every lodge or a group of lodges would have appended to it a lodge of instruction, in the United Grand Lodge of England, you don't have this system of what you call Corps of Grand Lecturers, because nobody around had the job of teaching it. That was left to the brethren themselves, senior brethren like William Preston. And over time, it was important not just to discuss rituals, but also the esoteric work, what the rituals mean. They had brethren who were recognized for their expertise in teaching this philosophy. That's why in the last century, the UGLE began the system or the program of what you call the Prestonian lecture. Now, this Prestonian lecture is not the equivalent of a senior grand lecturer, but he has a similar role in the sense that he is appointed to provide one specific lecture, sort of like what your senior grand lecturer does during district conventions. If you notice the district conventions, the lecture is the same because that is it reflects on the topic of the Masonic theme for the Masonic year. That is what a Prestonian lecturer does. He delivers that one lecture to lodges across the English Constitution throughout the year. Okay? And that is founded in recognition of William Preston, one of the greatest experts on the philosophy of the craft in the 1800s. Now, that's England. It's kind of hard to bring this lodge of instruction where you had 5, 7 brethren who meet regularly so that they can teach younger brethren regularly. You know, it's kind of hard to bring that all the way to the United States. Why? Because usually lodges in the United States are formed by one brother bringing a warrant and organizing a lodge from those who are new to Freemasonry. On the basis of his warrant, he makes them Freemasons, right? So when Freemasonry got to the United States, rather than lodges of instruction in the traditional English sense, you had true specialists in teaching the ritual. Specialists like Thomas Smith Webb, okay, who his famous work is the Freemasons Monitor. There are others like Duncan, okay, the most popular of these is Duncan. But Thomas Smith Webb is important to us Filipinos because his version of the Monitor, okay, which we call the Preston Web. It's based on Preston's teachings, but it was printed for the first time with on the basis of what was written down by Thomas Smith Webb. That's why we call it the Preston Webb ritual. Okay, that ritual became the basis for uniform ritual in uh, the Grand Lodges of the United States. Not all Grand Lodges are like this. Okay, in those Grand Lodges which did not mandate a uniform ritual, we call these constitutions non-uniform. Okay. In short, you can have your own ritual as long as it's not disapproved by the Grand Lodge. Okay. You don't have a grand lecture. But in those jurisdictions where you have a single uniform ritual, okay, like the District of Columbia, Massachusetts, Virginia, okay, you do have grand lectures like what we have in the Philippines. So the office of grand lecturer that was brought down to us because Massachusetts had a uniform ritual, Preston Webb. That Preston Webb ritual was adopted by California, and we ended up adopting it because our lodges are from California. Somebody had to teach that, and that is why we have Masonic lectures today. With the institutionalization of the fraternity, we had to have lectures to teach not just the ritual but the meaning of it so that you can apply it in daily life. That's what we call the esoteric work, which we will define more closely later. So from here we can see that these two strands of being a lecturer, primarily instructional on one hand as to what Freemasonry is about, and primarily being a mentor on the other as to how to do ritual properly. That evolved into doing three basic roles. The first of which is being a custodian of the work. If you go to our Masonic Constitution, that is the first and most important role of Masonic lecturers here. If you understand that the ritual is the basis for our philosophy of developing ourselves in fellowship and through mentorship, therefore have to realize that the ritual, it's important that it be properly instructed and performed. That is why our mentor, it is the first role of grand lecturers is to instruct, be custodians of this work. Okay? If you look at Edict number 260 on the proper use of the monitor, because in the work is done by Master Masons, you are presumed to already know the work. You cannot actually, it is unmasonic conduct to actually be using the monitor when you perform. You should already be proficient. Okay, so as custodians of the work, we not only teach the ritual and esoteric work, we also supervise its proper performance. And in that regard, all of the senior grand lecturer and all of the junior grand lecturers, they together call what we call the Committee on Works, whose sole task, its sole mandate, is to see to it that no innovations in the rituals and other ceremonies are done during the Masonic year without the approval of the Grand Lodge. Because the ritual, everything in the ritual, you'll see later, we'll give an example. Everything in the ritual means something. It is symbolic of something. And therefore, it must be not only be performed well, you cannot deviate from that ritual. Which leads me to segue into one point. Teka lang. Does that mean if the committee's mandate is to enforce the rule that no innovations in ritual shall be allowed? If that's the rule, does that mean you can never change Masonic ritual? That is a common misconception, brethren. The mandate in our Masonic law book is a mandate to ensure that as approved, okay, and the current version is per edict number 261-C, Gazmin, Most Worshipful Gazmin. That's the current version of our monitor. That's why we call it the Centennial Monitor 2015. Once approved, when you perform it, you cannot change. That's what no innovations mean. It doesn't mean that we will forever not change our ritual. On the contrary, when there are strong and compelling reasons, the brethren can deliberate upon this and approve them, approve changes in the Grand Lodge. And I'll give historical examples. The brother you see there at the bottom of your of the slide is most illustrious Albert Pike, much maligned by non-Masons, but truly a wise man. That's why, maybe that's why, because they you know, have a lot of issues with him, because he was a man ahead of his time, truly a Renaissance man. Before him, before he, there was a committee that was tasked to revise the then Scottish Rite rituals. Before he started with his revisions, when these were began to be issued in 1857. For those of you who are not Freemasons, there are two major strands of appendant bodies, the York Rite and the Scottish Rite. If you want to know more about this, please, I invite you to my lecture in April of next year on appendant bodies. These two strands of appendant bodies. One is the York Rite, where the Royal Ark is situated, where you learn more about the Royal Ark. But the other is the Scottish Rite, okay, where you go deeper into the philosophical roots of the craft. Before 1857, before Albert Pike, those the degrees there, okay, it's not a question of being higher, okay, it's a question of going deeper into the concept of the fraternity, okay. The system of the Scottish Rite was not as developed, and Brother Albert Pike, okay, made it conceptually consistent and substantively impressive. The force of one man and how he can change Freemasonry. Okay. Yeah, more recent case. On June 11, 1986, the United Grand Lodge of England. For those of you who are Freemason, you know that there are symbolic references to physical penalties in our ritual. Those are symbolic references. They are not meant to be carried out. But because of controversy on the part of non-Masons who want to twist the meaning, sometimes with a very in bad faith, with a bad agenda, the UGLE decided, much to the regret of many brethren, and today there's a move to bring them back, to take out references to those physical penalties in the rituals that they practice, in the rituals for their first, second, and third degree that they practice there. So that was approved in Grand Lodge there, the United Grand Lodge of England, on June 11, 1986. We've also changed the ritual when there are compelling reasons to do so. Chief Justice Puno, Most Worshipful Puno, when he was Grand Master in the 1980s, he issued an edict recognizing that when you have a public installation or a district convention, okay, and particularly if there's a public installation and you have the friends and family around, it's going to be very impractical to close the lodge again and do the ritual privately because they're already around, right? So his edict allowed for the closing of the lodge in ample form, that means sufficient form, during installations and district conventions, so that you can immediately go to fellowship. How do you do it respectfully? Given there's a compelling reason, because there are other guests in attendance, you know, if you're a worshipful master and you know, your boss, I mean your wife is there during your installation, you don't want to keep your wife waiting, right? Especially if your mother-in-law is also there, right? So there's a compelling reasons why Edict 85 was issued. Also recently, Edict 251-C of Most Worshipful Boy Gabionsa. This was issued during our centennial year to correct the closing of the lodge relating to the returning of the jewels of office of all lodge officers. For those who are non-Masons or guests here, if you are thinking that after this, that could mean that there are something valuable in lodges, I want to highlight when we say jewels, they are symbolically jewels. Okay, they're not jewels in the what we in the in the layman's sense. Okay, they are symbols of the office. How are they returned? Okay, the ritual was amended to take this into account just in 2012 with Edict 251-C. Okay, just before we leave this slide, you might want to know, brethren, uh, in February of this extended term, we will be talking about the different ways in which outsiders twist our philosophy, usually with in bad faith and very, uh, or because of ignorance. But there are some who are non-Masons who get it right. If you go to the Ayala Museum, I think it's under renovation now, but eventually after the crisis, you visit their gallery of dioramas. I found this out myself. I bring my daughter before. Diorama 31 depicts is an accurate depiction, not just of Masonic lodge, okay, but also what's being done there. If you read the paragraph below that, so there are those who get it right as to how our philosophy is actually practiced. If they are in good faith, they're bound to get it right because there's nothing that there is to hide in our philosophy. Okay, so I hope that's clarified. That is therefore the okay. That is therefore the first role of Masonic lecturers, to have to supervise and teach the ritual and esoteric work. What do you mean by esoteric work? That means, let's go to our second role. Here, the one in blue, you are seeing the second role of a Masonic lecturer in actual practice, which is what happened, which is the case in England. That's where we got the term lodge of instruction, because for our brothers in the UK, they're not, it's not on one individual, but it's on brethren teaching younger brethren, the brothers who will come after them, in a lodge of instruction that meets regularly, about how they should govern themselves and how they should do the work or the ritual, how they can learn from it. Okay? All of that work, the liturgy, the practice, the traditions, our history and philosophy related to our liturgy. Okay? Not just the ritual, but how we practice it and our traditions over time. That is in the sum of what we call esoteric work. What is esoteric? That's a fancy term. You can Google it. It really just means what it means. Intended for or likely to be understood by only a small number of people with a specialized knowledge or interest. Okay? And that's really the case. If you're single and you're looking for a girlfriend, you go to a bar, and if you end up talking about Freemasonry, she likely will not be interested. And probably she'll find it funny that you're talking about being mentored by an older guy or with some very arcane rituals that you learn from. Might not interest her. Okay? That's what it means, esoteric. It's very specialized knowledge. Okay? Very specialized knowledge. And something that is meant to be reflected upon privately. Okay? To give it an example in a religious context. When you make a confession, do you confess to everyone in public? No. you do that before you confess before a father confessor, right? To do the sacrament, because you have to do it privately, because it has to be reflective, and you have to get sound advice. Same thing. Same thing with our esoteric work. It's a philosophy that is meant to build the cathedral within your heart. And therefore, the way you do it is not by making yabang. Okay? The way you do it is to reflect on the philosophy as you practice it, when you go through performing it, when you initiate, enter the apprentices, pass them into the fellow craft degree, and raise them as master masons. So, the second traditional role of Masonic lectures is to mentor on the ritual and esoteric work, which is the sum of our liturgy, philosophy, and history, and exemplify it. Does that mean that lecturers are all knowing and get it right? No. We don't expect you to, when you become, for example, your first role, you end up being a district grand lecturer, right? We don't expect you to be always right, but we expect you to follow the spirit, okay, of the liturgy, because the spirit, the rationale will guide you when you do the form, okay? Eventually, you will make a mistake in your first, if you end up being a district grand lecturer. Everybody does. Even senior grand lecturers, okay? We disagree among ourselves, okay, about certain portions of the ritual. But there is now uniform. When it comes to the uniform interpretation, okay, while one SGL in 1 year might get it wrong, that is eventually corrected. That's why we have this core of grand lecturers to eventually get it right. Okay. Now, this instruction, of course, is not just when you're performing the ritual. It's also applying that philosophy in practice. That's the point of our monthly Masonic education program. In the lodges, okay, in addition to doing Masonic work, a lecturer, and this is what you more know him for, he also does the monthly Masonic lectures mandated by the Grand Lodge, which is to make the philosophy practical. I know that for those of you in the craft, many of you are may sometimes be disillusioned by a lecturer who gets the monthly lecture, reads it, and sits down. He's not being a lecturer if he does that. He's being a lector. He's not supposed to be a lector. Okay? A lector, like when you go to mass, who just reads. Okay? He's not supposed to just pronounce by reading the lecture. He's supposed to give his insights on it. That's why, if you notice, this year, when we were still operating before the suspension, this year we started to highlight, it's not just reading the ritual, it's giving your own experience to apply it. Okay, so that is the second traditional role. There's a third. If the first was to keep custody of the work, and the second is to teach it properly and apply it. Okay, wait, before that, the third is to make sure that you have brethren who are well versed in it. But before I go into that, you might ask, teka lang, itong practice, traditions, esoteric work, baka bola-bola lang yan. What if all that's just, mumbo-jumbo just to impress? Okay? Here's my advice for those of you who are not in Freemasonry. Experience it. Okay? And I'll give you a small sample of that experience now, the next 5 minutes. When we say philosophy, we really mean that every word in our liturgy has symbolical applications. And for that, I'll give you an example lesson of what we mean by that. By going to Back to our history. Remember the foundations? I'm sorry. Remember the foundations of our Grand Lodge? The modern Grand Lodge that we know it today? Institutional Freemasonry was born on June 24, 1717. June 24 is the feast day of St. John the Baptist. Okay? The UGLE, they decided to merge purposely on December 27, 1813, which is the feast day of St. John the Evangelist. Okay? Why? Why those two saints? Because I am not spilling any secrets here. Because if you look in our ritual, even on the first degree, okay, when you enter as a Freemason, you will find that a portion, I obviously cannot say where, but you will find that a portion of our ritual specifically make mention of the fact that all Masonic lodges are dedicated to the Holy Saints John. Who are the Holy Saints John? Saint John the Baptist and Saint John the Evangelist. Here is where those in bad faith, okay, twist this. There are many, and I'll be specific, there are many non-Christians. For those of you who don't know, many Muslim countries, Indonesia for one, and there are countries in the Arabian Peninsula also. Masonry is not allowed. As a matter of fact, it's illegal because of, let me highlight, these kinds of mischaracterizations. You get this piece of information. Oh, the ritual says that lodges are dedicated to the Holy Saints John. And then you find out that the Holy Saints John are Saints John the Baptist and Saint John the Evangelist, the Christian saints we find in the New Testament. So if you're a non-Christian, you say, aha, I knew it. This is just conspiracy in disguise to promote Christianity. You see, that highlights the kind of and the misinterpretation that is often twisted to go against the philosophy. If you want to know more about this, brethren, the lecture in February next year will dwell on this kind of fake news. Okay, but let's go back to the philosophical lesson. This is an example of esoteric work. Okay, a portion of our ritual, esoteric work is liturgy, practice, and tradition. A portion of our ritual says that our lodges specifically are dedicated to the Holy Saints John. What does that mean? Does that mean that we are, after all, adherents to all, we must all be Christians? Well, there are portions in the appended degrees where you must be a Trinitarian Christian, but that is not the case with craft Freemasonry. It is a secular ethical system that must be founded on your faith, but you don't have to be a Christian. So what about this passage? The passage is there because of three reasons. We dedicate our lodges to these two Christian saints, not because they are Christian saints, but because they best exemplify the kind of servant leadership that we expect from brother Masons. What is these two kinds of servant leadership? Very different. Saint John the Baptist, his kind of servant leadership is heroic and collaborative leadership. Who is Saint John the Baptist? He's the cousin of Jesus Christ. Let's go to history. What did he do? He prepared the way for the Messiah. And the Gospel of Matthew, for one, it's there. It mentions that he was killed because of his beliefs. He died for his beliefs while Jesus was in his ministry. Okay, but the way he got everyone together collaboratively to prepare the way for the Messiah, that's what we're highlighting historically. Collaborative leadership in preparing the way and dying for your beliefs. Most of us will not be that kind of heroic leader. Okay? Most of us, however, will be like Saint John the Evangelist. Historically, if you ask Christian scholars, this saint is actually historically potentially more significant than Saint John the Baptist, because it's not completely proven, but there are arguments that he wrote the Gospel of John, and okay, among the disciples, he is the only one of the 12. They had a replacement for Judas, by the way. Historically, he was the only one among the 12 who did not meet the fate of Saint John the Baptist. Saint Peter, crucified in Rome. You can go down through all of the 12 except him. Saint John the Evangelist died in his 90s. He lived a quiet life, but a life of value. And he did the Gospel of John and the letters and the book of Revelation. That's in the New Testament today. So that is an example of quiet and thoughtful leadership that most of us will do. Okay? And that's what we want to highlight in our philosophy. Okay? That's why the liturgy, if you go into the lecture of Enter the Apprentices, the Holy Saints John are mentioned as the two eminent patrons of Freemasonry. In this tracing board which Masonic lecturers use to lecture on the esoteric work, they're indicated there because they highlight how you must use the square and compasses, how you use the philosophy to exercise quiet leadership on one hand, quiet and thoughtful leadership, reflective leadership, or how you must fight for your beliefs, heroic and collaborative leadership when necessary. And that is why, brethren, and our guests, it is no coincidence that the feast days of the Holy Saints John are also the feast days for the foundations of our institutional craft. And that, in 7 minutes, is an example of what Masonic lecturers teach when it comes to esoteric work. They just don't talk about the ritual. They talk about how the ritual applies in daily life. Okay? So, that's the second role. The first role, as I highlighted earlier, was custodian of the work. The second role is this. How do you apply our philosophy daily? There is a third role. And that role is, how do you make sure that brethren are truly prepared, worthy, and well qualified to continue and sustain this institution. That's why Masonic lecturers traditionally are also what we call judges of craftsmanship. When it comes to lodge officers, they must examine and certify that they know the rules on lodge governance as traditionally handed down from time immemorial and now encapsulated in our Masonic law book. They must be proficient in the work and lectures. And for that, before they are installed as officers, therefore, they must be issued these certificates of proficiency. For every master mason in this jurisdiction, after you finish the 3 degrees, in order for you to join an appendant body, to vote, or to do exercise other benefits of being a master mason, you must be proficient in your in the 3rd degree. Okay, the work and lectures. Who examines you? Okay, you are examined before the lodge. Okay, and if you are found by the lodge to have passed your examination, they can issue that certificate of proficiency that gives you the full privileges of being truly a master Mason, which is the start of your Masonic journey. Okay? And then also for Grand Lodge inspectors, the SGL must make, on the recommendation of the DDGMs, must endorse Grand Lodge inspectors because, as you will see later, okay, they perform important functions with regards to this role of judging craftsmanship. Okay? So in a sense, there are compliance functions. Okay? I will not go through that in detail anymore, brethren. There, in the next slide, you will see that you can basically there are basically 3 major compliance functions that grand lecturers do. They want to make sure that the monthly reports are in. Okay, for this, the Grand Lodge inspector is the resource. They want to make sure that there's Masonic education. And I must highlight that in addition to the monthly Masonic education required by the Grand Lodge, lodges who are really into this also have separate programs. You can appoint your own lodge lecturer to also have a separate program in addition to that provided by the Grand Lodge. Okay, so you can have two lectures, one the Grand Lodge and one your own. If you want to focus on an area of the philosophy that's unique to your lodge, that is of special interest to your lodge. Like for example, Plaridel. We just recently celebrated, birth anniversary. Marcelo del Pilar. Okay, if you're a lodge in memory of his memory, you might want to have a Masonic education program specifically as to him. Appoint a lodge lecturer. Okay, we are highlighting here the role. Okay, as against the office. Okay, and then of course the proficiency examinations, as I've highlighted earlier, of Master Masons and Officers Elect. Needless to state, as to Officers Elect, the golden rule is no certificate of proficiency, no installation. Okay? It's that simple. Okay? No certificate of proficiency, you cannot be installed as an officer. Going forward, brethren. So, those are the traditional roles. How do we interpret them in our current grand jurisdiction? Okay? As I highlight, in our constitution in Masonic Law Book, if you look at the functions of grand lectures, they're pretty extensive, but you basically can all put them into these three roles: as custodian of the work, the senior grand lecturer, and his subordinates, junior grand lecturer, and the over 200 district grand lecturers supervise the work, make sure that the GLP monitor is properly performed and the work well. Takes a look at the state of the craft to see if, for example, if he's usually the one who recommends if there's a change in ritual. But before brethren approve that or deliberate upon it, during each fiscal year, the senior grand lecturer, together with the junior grand lecturers, as the committee on work, they make sure that there is no innovation in what we do, because every phrase here, as you've seen, with just the phrase dedicated to the Holy Saints John, every phrase here has meaning. Okay? So that meaning he instructs in his role as mentor of the guild, okay, so that brethren can apply this not just in the lodge but in life. And to sustain the fraternity, okay, he also acts as a judge of craftsmanship in terms of certifying as to the proficiency of lodge officers, master masons, and with regards to the senior grand lecturer, grand lodge inspectors. This is cascaded down, brethren. If you look at, if you look at the Masonic Law Book, that is the reason why there is a separate, from the Grand Master, there are two hierarchical waterfalls. Okay, the first is the personal representative of the Grand Master to every lodge through the districts. That is a district deputy Grand Master. So when the Grand Master supervises all of the lodges, he does so through his personal representatives, the DDGM. Okay? In addition to that, as to the three roles I am talking about, custodian of the work, mentor of the guild, judge of craftsmanship, okay? The SGL does that through his subordinates, which are the junior grand lecturers and the district grand lecturers. We are divided into regions, the Corps of Grand Lecturers, so that the junior grand lecturers can circulate and mentor DGL. So usually, this is your first role. If you enter the Corps of Grand Lecturers, this is your first role as a DGL. Your first recourse is your junior grand lecturer above you. Okay? The DGL, okay, by law, has two bosses. With regards to the three traditional roles, he has delegated authority to do the role of the SGL in the lodges, usually 2 or 3 only assigned to him. 2 or 3 only. Okay? But in addition, since he is with the DDGM in his district, together the DGLs there, they are also mandated to be assistants of the DDGM in carrying out the instructions of the Grand Master, pursuant to the DDGM's authority as the personal representative in the district of the Grand Master. So the DGL has 2 bosses. When he's present, and it relates to Masonic work, it relates to lodge governance, it relates to our traditions, he is enforcing the delegated authority given to him by the SGL. When he is assisting the Grand Lodge in supervising the lodge through the DDGM, he is the DDGM's assistant. Okay? So now you're going to ask, where do the Grand Lecturers come in? Okay? The only commissioned, not appointed, but commissioned officers. What does a commission look like? Okay? It looks like that piece of paper. Everybody who becomes a Grand Lodge inspector, he gets this very nice, it's on certificate paper, commission, countersigned by the SGL and signed by the Grand Master, giving him authority. What is that authority? You'll see that here, brethren. It's our poll 2. Our second poll. Which of the following is not a reason why the GLI's commission is signed by the SGL and the Grand Master? All of these, the 4, okay, they're supposed to be reasons why the commission is given to a GLI, except one. What is that, brethren? Is it A, the commission requires the GLI to be accountable to both the DDGM and SGL when exercising his powers and fulfilling his duties? That's why the SGL also signs. Is it B, the commission is a certification of the appointee's qualifications to serve as endorsed by the SGL? Parang giveaway na yon, di ba? If you know the 3 traditional rules. Third, is it this one? The commission facilitates the exercise of the SGL's delegated authority when necessary to instruct and qualify officers. Or is it D, the commission provides a mandate to the GLI to assist the SGL in carrying out the latter's duties within a lodge assigned to the GLI? One lodge, one Grand Lodge inspector. What do you think is the answer? Kuya Dennis, can we have the poll? What do you think is the answer, brethren? Can we start the poll? 4 questions. Brethren, this is not pass or fail. You will not be graded. I know it's potentially confusing because we haven't talked about it yet. That's understandable, but you're not going to be graded, so no need to change answers. Okay, no need to change answers. It's purposely confusing because you'll see it's a very fine distinction that you have to make, which you'll find out when you finish with this poll. Okay, so now we have 231 on our attending. Let's give it a few more minutes. Very worshipful Dennis, this is a hard question, so maybe we should give 1 minute or 1.5 minutes. Commission requires the GLI to be accountable. Naku, baka yan. The GLI is accountable to the Grand Master. Or could be B. Certification appointees qualification. Of course not. Is that the case? B? Why do I need to? Why does somebody need to certify as to my qualifications? Or is it C? Delegated authority. Ha? Hindi ba district grand lecturer yon? O baka D? Assist the SGL. Ano yun? Mhm. We wonder. Okay. 52% have voted. Maybe one more minute. We understand this is a hard choice. For those of you who are not in the fraternity yet, but who are members of our webinar, registrants, please feel free to vote. Give it a shot. You'd be surprised. This is not something that many Freemasons know the distinction of. Okay, last 30 seconds, 63% have voted. Kuya Dennis,
Can we end the polls?
we're good to go. Yes. Let's see the result. Let's share the results, brother. Okay. So here are the results. I hope everybody can see the results now. Okay, first, which is clearly a function of the certification. For those of you who answered B, I think it's my fault. I hope it wasn't my fault. But if you notice, I talked about the SGL being a judge of craftsmanship. Well, one reason why the SGL signs that commission is because the SGL, on the endorsement of the incoming DDGMs, must check or counter check that the past master who is assigned as a GLA to a specific lodge is indeed qualified. Okay, so that cannot be B. I'm sorry for the 31 or the 20% of you answered. What's another wrong answer? Okay, you will find when we talk about compliance functions that the SGL does. There is some specific delegated authority to GLIs specifically with regards to some of the SGL's functions. Okay, and we'll talk about that later. Now, if you're not aware of this, we'll talk about it. But clearly, it's not the other 20% of you said C. That's a reason why there's a commission, because there is some delegated authority specifically given directly to GLIs by the SGL, and we'll find that out later. Okay, now we go between A and D. Okay, if you know that there is some delegated authority directly to GLIs given by the SGL, then you have to say that A is a wrong answer also. Because then the GLI, with regards to that delegated authority, is accountable to the SGL. Why is it D, therefore? Why can you not say that the commission provides a mandate for the GLI to assist the senior grand lecturer in carrying out the latter's duties? That's what we'll find out now. Okay? For those of you who are not aware of what, I'll stop sharing now. For those of you who are not aware of what Grand Lodge inspectors are, those of you outside the fraternity, these are, let me just wait for the slide to appear. Okay. Grand Lodge inspectors are model past masters. Okay, remember, this is a philosophy founded on mentorship. So here, after you finish your term, where in our system of governance, you have almost dictatorial powers. Not because we're trying to make you a dictator, but because we want to emphasize the element of trust that the brethren give you. Okay? After you become a past master, all of those powers cease. But you have a lot of past masters who know how to run a lodge well. They can mentor lodges. So, you get these past masters now from another lodge. You make them mentor brethren in another lodge in the district. So that, so that there's not too much sacrifice on the part of the Grand Lodge inspector. It will be in the same district. So the concept is that they are model past masters, and for every lodge, we have one Grand Lodge inspector who has six powers, which we can categorize into two themes. When he inspects, and that means when he confirms the correctness when necessary, okay, of what? The work, okay, decorum and clothing, and okay, the committee on investigation, that it's done its work properly. Remember the lecture last session on what the committee investigation for every petitioner does? By the way, I was asked this query after, okay? Some brethren have this notion that since, I'll just segue a bit because this wasn't highlighted in the previous lecture. Some brethren have this curious notion that because the committee on investigation is remains anonymous and will not be known to the petitioner, some brethren have this curious notion that among themselves they also don't know each other. Brethren, that's not the case. Precisely, the law says committee of investigation. The committee meets and deliberates to produce one report. If the law says that they should also not know, our Masonic law, if it meant to have them not know each other, it would be worded as follows. The worshipful master shall appoint brethren who shall investigate. Therefore, there, they don't work together. When you say committee, that means you work together. Okay, so I hope that notion of them being anonymous to each other is dispelled. But here, the Grand Lodge inspector, he, after the report is done, he makes sure that the committee has done its work, because as highlighted by when this was introduced, we recognize that some worshipful masters might forget to do this when this is important. If you listen to my lecture last time, okay. In addition to this, he also has supervisory powers to guide conduct when appropriate as to the conduct of elections and the annual report. So why should he exercise his powers? He exercises his powers in the fulfillment of 9 duties, which are provided in our Masonic law book. Very easy to remember these duties if you classify them into 4 classes. Okay? The first class is to mentor. Okay? When he attends meetings, particularly when the conferral of degrees are there, when he inspects the committee on investigations report, when he checks on balloting to make sure that it's done properly, he acts as a mentor to emphasize to brethren the importance of doing it right. Diba? He also, okay, facilitates the programs of the Grand Lodge. Okay? Take note of what he facilitates. He obtains approval for what the lodge is doing with the Grand Lodge, particularly with regards to fundraisers, so that the programs are consistent. And here, he assists the DDGM, and take note, the DDGM and DGL. That's important because you should distinguish the duties regarding facilitation of programs with his duties to confirm. Okay? And this is where the delegated authority of the SGL comes in. He is when the SGL specifically delegates to, he can. For example, there's no DGL. Okay? The junior grand lecturer on instructions of the SGL and the SGL can instruct the GLI to do the proficiency exam and issue the certification for that lodge. Okay? And if that doesn't happen, if they fail to qualify, he has to report it to the DGM because, there's a Masonic violation there. So that is the instance where he has delegated authority, not from the DGL, not from the junior grand lecturer, but directly from the SGL. That's why you see, let's go back, brethren. That's why you see that D is clearly the wrong answer here. When he does something for the SGL, it is because, and we're talking of the proficiency exam and the certificate of proficiency, it is because he has expressly delegated that power with regards to being a judge of craftsmanship. But he is not there to assist the junior grand lecturer, the SGL, okay, in their functions, or the DGL in the exercise of his delegated functions from the SGL. Okay? What is he there to assist the DGL for? When the DGL is acting as the assistant of the DDGM in governing the lodge. That's why our Masonic law book is phrased that way. If you remember, brethren, let's just wait for the slides to catch up. If you remember, brethren, a DGL, he reports to two bosses. Directly above him, the junior grand lecturer, and then the SGL for the performance of those three traditional roles. He is also as to the lodges assigned to him, the immediate assistance of the DDGM. When the DDGM carries out his role as the personal representative of the Grand Master. So, a commission, okay? A commission, when that governance role is exercised, relates to that function. When he assists the DGL, he assists the DGL in his role of in turn assisting the DDGM, not in the three traditional functions of Grand Lecturer. That's why they're in a way, okay, you can highlight that they're really not lecturers, Grand Lodge inspectors. What are they more? They're more focused as mentors of the lodge itself. Because they've gone through, and usually these are immediate past masters, they've gone through the experience of actually governing a lodge. They now use that experience to help an incumbent grandmaster. I'm sorry, an incumbent master, as he now goes through his experience of governing his lodge. Okay? So that's the distinction between the Grand Lodge inspectors, the only commissioned officers of our Grand Lodge, and the appointed corps of Grand Lecturers. Okay, that leads us to our final poll for this evening. And that is the favorite use of lecturers by many brethren. Okay? When they are confused about something Masonic, they go to their lecturer. Okay? Whether that's their local DGL or their junior grand lecturer, if he happens to be inspecting, or if they know the email address and mobile number of the SGL, they go all the way up. Okay? No problem, di ba? We are here to answer your queries, but there are proper ways to answer queries, and there are proper uses of queries, and there are not proper uses. One of these things is not like the other. What are they? Okay, so the question, our last question for the evening is, when should you not have a grand lecturer answer your query? Is it A, to obtain guidance as to what to do when needing to address matters related to Masonic work or lodge governance? Guidance. What sort of guidance? That's vague. Can you trust your DGL with that? Baka yan, A. Or B, when it comes to settling an argument in the lodge about how to enforce a vague Masonic regulation? B. Baka yan. You know why? Kasi they end up arguing anyway. Di ba? Brethren will still argue. So what's the point in asking a query? Di ba? Or is it C? Facilitate a good faith defense against a charge of unmasonic conduct. Wow! Paano yun? Is it C? Baka yan. But, if you did something unmasonic, kakasuhan ka pa naman eh. So what's the use of C? Right? Or is it D? Receive considered perspectives on Masonic traditions as a foundation for further reflection and dialogue. Sounds like mambo jumbo. Maybe it's D. Oh, paano yan? A, B, C, and D. They all look like the correct answer. Maybe the problem is the question. Let's see. Very worshipful Dennis, can we have the poll? Which one of these is not like the other? In other words, three of these you should go to your grand lecture, whether that's the DGL, GGL, or SGL. But one, you shouldn't use it for this reason. What would be that reason, Ben? If I looked at it, mukhang apat eh. But if that's the case, then the question is wrong. We shouldn't go. We shouldn't have queries anymore. And then you can hear a sigh of relief from all of my junior grad lecturers and DGLs. Yes, but seriously, seriously, we do entertain. That's our role, a part of our instructional role. We do entertain your queries for three of the reasons here, but not for one. What would be that case? What would be that case? Oh, brethren, here I don't know if it's really difficult, but please, you just pick one answer. We can see it. We can see you answering. You just pick an answer. No, don't worry. You're not being graded. Okay. I'm sorry, but there's no E. All of the above. If it were all of the above, I can hear some of our grad lecturers, my junior grad lecturers, breathe a sigh of relief here. But I'm sorry to destroy your hopes. This is a role that traditionally we must do in our instructional capacity. So if you have query, we are duty bound to entertain it for the right reasons. Okay, for the right reasons. Okay. Wow, a lot of your answering. For all percent, maybe 30%. I'm sorry, 30 seconds more. Maybe 30 seconds more. Wala. I'm sorry. There's no E. Okay. I mean, this really is a role of lecturers. So there's no E. So if a DGL mentioned this, okay, I'm on the lookout for you. I hope you're kidding. Okay, Kuya Dennis, maybe last 10 seconds. We have 73% of our 231 in our webinar who have cast their votes. Maybe we can stop at 10 seconds. We'll end the poll now. Okay, let's end the poll and let's share the results. Okay, brethren. Let's go to the easy one. D. Receive considered perspectives on Masonic traditions as a foundation for further reflection and dialogue. Oh, that was easy. Why? As I highlighted with the sample lesson on St. John the Evangelist, okay? A part of our teaching role really is to apply the lessons of ritual in your daily life and to make you better men together, right? So that's clearly D. That's just a highfalutin way of saying it, but that's clearly D, right? What about A? Obtain guidance. Yes. With regards to properly performing ritual, that's a correct answer, right? So it now must be, it must be B or C, right? More than half of you said C, that C is wrong. Brethren, I'm sorry to say, but that's a wrong answer. Asking a lecturer or giving a query to a lecturer to get that lecturer's opinion on a matter that is within his jurisdiction. Okay, lodge governance and our esoteric work, which is liturgy, philosophy, and traditions. If it falls within the scope, okay, so clearly it doesn't apply if it's like, for example, Grand Lodge elections. Okay, but if it falls within a scope, okay, and you act on it based on that opinion, while that opinion can be wrong, that can be a good faith defense because you now highlight, I did due diligence, I asked my lecturer, and I'm sorry it's wrong, sometimes lecturers get it wrong, but I acted on that opinion. So even if it's wrong, it's a good faith defense if you end up, okay, against a charge of Masonic and Masonic conduct. What would be an example of that? Okay, you're doing uh, second degree, and the second degree of Freemasonry, you're performing it. Okay, when you're passing a fellow craft mason, right? And it's been some time since you've done it, so it comes out that three of you end up using three, not just one. Three end up referring to the monitor while doing the degree. Now, uh, right now, previously, the monitor before this, it didn't have the edict, edict 260, right? It's not here, okay? But in the current one, it has. Let's say you have that version. You kind of suspect that that's not allowed, and it's not. But the district grand lecturer who's present notices the three of you doing it, and you therefore ask him, very worshipful sir, uh, I understand this might not be appropriate, but we want to make sure that we do this right. Can we, you as worshipful master, can we use the three? And the DGL, not having a copy of the edict, thinks that they're in good faith. To make sure that the ritual is done correctly. Sige, I'll allow it. Lo and behold, after the passing, after the passing, you have another brother there who doesn't like you and files an Masonic conduct charges against you. Okay? Jackpot. What can you rely on? Your DGL. Your DGL was wrong. Okay? But you did due diligence. You asked him. Okay? Now, the DGL, he has something to explain to the SGL. But remember, he's not implementing the work. You are. So you're going to be the one charged with unmasonic conduct as worshipful master, not him. But you asked for his advice. Because you asked for his advice, C is applicable here. Okay? In a charge of unmasonic conduct, such as that case, you relied in good faith on the opinion, even though it was wrong. So what's wrong here? What's wrong is B. Okay? If you know the traditional roles of lecturers, you're not supposed to use them. You're not supposed to call up very worshipful Kalaw and says, very worshipful sir, here's the situation. We have a dispute here, and is this right? You ask some question out of the blue. So, given your facts, or at least how you represent your facts, I provide advice, and you go now to the lodge and say, this is what very worshipful Kalaw said. You have to highlight, grand lecturers are not legal officers. They are not Grand Lodge legal counsels. Okay? What we gave you is advice to help you govern the lodge. Okay? It's not going to end up settling it because inherently our powers, our instructional powers, are not definitive. They are persuasive. What does that mean? If you want a definite opinion on a Masonic law or regulation, and it is vague, remember my lecture in July. You must go to the Committee on Jurisprudence to get a definite answer, if there is no definite answer yet. The task of a lecturer, okay, is to make sure that lodges govern themselves appropriately and smoothly, and Masonic work is done well and with no innovation. So with regards to lodge governance and Masonic traditions and esoteric work, our advice when you ask us for a query is persuasive. In short, it should ideally get the brethren to think na, oh nga no, siguro dapat ganun. But you can say, because Very Worshipful Kalao said it and because he's SGL, that's the law. That's not the case. Regardless of who the SGL is. Okay? Regardless of who the JGL or the DGL is. Okay? We're supposed to persuade you to follow what's right. Does that mean that a DGL can stop proceedings if you're doing something wrong? No. The DGL, if for example, you get carried away and you conduct something that is illegal during initiation, passing, and raising, illegal not just by Masonic law but the law of the Philippines. The DGL is not only has a power but has the duty to stop proceedings and hold you liable for that, for the violation, the unmasonic conduct that you're doing. But such instances are very rare. Okay, if there is blatant disregard of regulations, it's not just the DGL, but also more particularly the DDGM and the Grand Lodge Inspector who must step in to correct the violations. But in most cases, okay, you'll have several sides on how to do it. Okay, please note our instructional powers are persuasive in nature. Okay, so recap, brethren. We're now in our third part of the day. We talked about the history and origins of the office, its concept, how it originates. Okay, how it originates from as basis the origins of Freemasonry itself, free, accepted, and that substrata of Freemasons we call ancient Masons. Okay, how did the office of lecturer originate? And we realize that basically it has come to, when you talk of what a Masonic lecturer does, while he has different functions in different jurisdictions, you can basically relate to one of these three. In the Philippines, we have all three. In England, they only have the first one, instruction, right? But here in the Philippines, okay, he is first a custodian of the work. He inspects, make sure that there's no innovations, and make sure that the work is done properly. That's what we do. Okay? What we do as Masons, we perform the work. Okay? And then, to better ourselves, which is the point of Freemasonry, make us better Freemasons in this lifetime journey, he mentors. He performs his function as mentor of the guild. He does that two primary ways. The monthly Masonic education, the theme that we have every year, and in his instructional capacity, whether it's a formal lodge of instruction or whether it's a query presented to him as to lodge management and Masonic governance or Masonic liturgy and traditions. Okay, what is he performing there? He is facilitating, okay, instruction in what makes us better men. And in doing that, he also makes himself a better man. Okay? Now, those are not just the only things we do. In addition to the work and applying the work, we also have to think of the future. And the future is everyone after us. So it is his job, it is his role as a Masonic lecturer to be a judge of craftsmanship, to make sure that the brethren who come after him are just as proficient as he is. Okay? And that's not just the proficiency exam of officers elect, but also master masons. Okay? And, okay, how lodges are governed. And you'll see that through the monthly and annual reports. All of this is asterisk. That is performed in this jurisdiction by the SGL. He obviously can't. I obviously can't inspect all 400 lodges. That's why we have 23 junior grand lecturers and over 200 DGLs to do these three roles. Another way of looking at it, these roles, is what we call the modern Masonic lecturers practice triangle. What you see here, brethren, What you see here, you can highlight basically into just 3 words: instruct, persuade, and ensure. As the foundation of this triangle, okay, if you are a grand lecturer, you must instruct brethren on how they can use Masonic light so that together, not singularly. That doesn't make sense if ikaw lang. That's why we're lodges, okay? You must instruct brethren on how to use Masonic light so that together we make ourselves better as we go throughout life. And how do you do that? Obviously, it starts with the work. You must persuade brethren, therefore, to do Masonic work well and appropriately. No deviation. Do it well because every phrase counts. Even the phrase dedicated to the Holy Saints John, just that one phrase, and look how thick this book is. Just that one phrase, it has lessons. How can you instruct if the brethren don't know the work well? So you must persuade them to work well and appropriately. And you do that by best ensuring that those after you are as proficient as you. You ensure that the craft continues to grow and create value for all, not just Masons, but all society, through worthy and well-qualified brethren. They know they have proficiency in the 3rd degree. When they finish first, second, and third, they are proficient. You certify to that. You issue the certificate. And all officers, they know how to govern a lodge. That's the modern Masonic lecturer's triangle. Instruct so that you can persuade and ensure. And the basis for all of this is what's at the center of the triangle: your faith. How do you utilize this secular system based on your individual faith? As most worshipful Danny Angles likes to highlight, there is no salvation in Masonry. You will find that in your faith. But having said that, this is a way to make yourself truly better through others. Okay? So my last question for today, brethren, before we go to question, my last question for today is, given all of this, okay, would you consider joining the Corps of Grand Lecturers? I would strongly urge you, especially after you have finished a term as Worshipful Master or Grand Lodge Inspector, to continue your journey and become DGL or Junior Grand Lecturer. Okay? For this, I want to highlight, a member of any Masonic constitution is not really a Freemason until his own brethren deem him to be, in creed and indeed, a true brother of the craft, usually at the end of his days. Okay? Those who will deem you a true Freemason is not you. It's your own brothers. They will be the one to judge you. Okay, and to do that, that means you have to continue to better yourself. And very often that means leading not a heroic life, but a quiet life of quiet kind of leadership. Best exemplified here by someone very few brethren know now, but who I think is one of the most worthy Masons ever. And that is, and he is the person here pictured, not my grandfather. In this picture of the group here, you see the picture of the group here. The person standing is my grandfather, Most Worshipful Teodoro Calo Jr. I'm not referring to him. I am referring. Thank you to Cable Toe for this picture, by the way. I'm referring to this person here, where the arrow is pointing. He is not very worshipful. He is right worshipful. Yes, he is right worshipful. Hermogenes Oliveros. And he was our grand lecturer from 1953 to 1979 and 1989. Okay? More than almost 3 decades. And the reason why grandmasters kept appointing him is because he best exemplified those 3 traditional rules. In the 1980s, he was getting a bit senior na, in recognition of the fact, it doesn't, just because you're a Mason, the end goal is not to be Grand Master, it's to become a true Mason. In recognition of that fact, the Grand Lodge made him an honorary deputy Grand Master. Currently, there are only two. Him and Right Worshipful Nanding Pasqua, another senior Grand Lecturer, four-time senior Grand Lecturer. Uh, Together, the two of them, they symbolize a life of quiet service where the Grand Lodge, in a communication, the brethren are saying, you are worthy and well qualified for us to deem you right worshipful. He's only one of two honorary deputy grandmasters that we have. Unfortunately, he passed away already. And I hope this is one way of remembering him. Okay, that can be the life you lead as a when you try out for the role. Uh, a life that I want to emphasize is focus on the fact that leadership is not just being heroic. I had a great read this National Heroes Day, the autobiography of Jose Abad Santos, Chief Justice. Jose Abad Santos, the late Chief Justice. He was martyred in World War II. He was our Grand Master in 1938. And he led the heroic life because he was the one who volunteered to stay in the Philippines for the actual Philippine government, not the Laurel government, the actual Philippine government. Okay, when everybody else went into exile, they caught him, they killed him. That's heroic leadership. We honor that. We honor him for it. But most of us will not. Thank gosh, thank the heavens, will not be asked to have that great sacrifice. Most of us will lead a life of quiet leadership, like Right Worshipful Oliveros, and like Most Worshipful Reynold Fajardo here, our Grand Master in 1986. Many people don't know this, but the largest law firm in the Philippines was developed by Most Worshipful Fajardo. For over 3 decades, he led the Citizens Legal Assistance Office. Yung public attorney's office now. He led that. He built that. You want free legal aid, you go to that office. Okay? That's the largest law firm in the country now, not one of those big firms. It's that, those who provide free legal aid to those who are indigent. Okay? And for 3 decades, Most Worshipful Fajardo led. He's actually more known as a Masonic scholar, but he built and developed that office. That's quiet service. That's creating value. Okay? You can be like that. You can be like that if you're a lecturer. I want to highlight this as my last point because becoming a grand lecturer can either be easy or challenging. It's easy because if you look at the statistics, we need over 200 district grand lecturers every year. And we need over 23 junior grand lecturers. Okay? We need that many because every 2 or 3 lodges, we need a DGL. It's very easy for you to eventually, volunteer and get yourself called very worshipful. Yes, it's very easy. And the tragedy, brethren, you know this, those who are already in the fraternity, the tragedy is many DGLs stop there. You stop, okay na, very worshipful na ako. Okay na. I highlight that as a tragedy because when you do that, you stop becoming a better man. You don't go forward in becoming a true Mason. When you should be focusing on the role and not the office. What is the role? The 3 roles that I talked about. When you practice those 3 roles, as highlighted by the modern Masonic lecturers, practice triangle. When you instruct, persuade, and ensure. Okay? When you practice those 3 roles, okay? You, by doing that, okay, it is in doing that you provide more light in Masonry, not just for the brethren that you serve, but ultimately for yourself also. And that is when Freemasonry becomes real. But that can only happen if you challenge yourself. So that's my last question to you. I'm not talking about our guests here outside Freemason. I'm talking about brethren now, and specifically our DGLs that I'm supervising now, and our GGLs. That's my last question to you. You wanna take the easy road or the challenging path? You might find that the challenging path ultimately is more rewarding. The choice is yours. Thank you very much, brethren, and I hope you found today's lecture interesting, and hopefully you find something that you can take away from this evening. Thank you very much. Very worshipful Dennis, questions?
Thank you very much, very worshipful Teddy. As always, it's been very informative and enlightening to everybody who are listening. And we're very thankful for your time and commitment on this matter. I hope the brethren were able to, and those who are here in this webinar, were able to capture a lot of new information, and definitely will reinvigorate, our grand lecturers around the country at this point in time. So, Kuya Teddy, I think you can click now on the Q&A and see
Okay,
on the questions
okay.
that were
To
posted. Yeah.
okay, to expedite, no,
Yeah.
Kuya Dennis, I will focus on questions related to the lecture,
Yes.
okay?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Because what we wanna discourage, like last time, is a lot of ano. So if it doesn't relate to I'll skip it, okay?
Okay.
So there's a question here on GLP website registration. You might wanna you want Kuya Oliver, or do you wanna take this, or let's
What
skip
was
it
the
first? Let's skip. I'm sorry, that's website registration has nothing to. I'll focus on the website. Unless Kuya
Yeah.
Oliver, you wanna come in? Okay. Okay. Let me focus on the lecture today.
No, let's skip
Um.
that.
Okay. Let me focus on the lecture today. How can we comply to Edict 330 that the secretary should be a past master if there will be no election this year? Will an incumbent secretary who's not a past master also be extended his term? Yes. Uh, with the, that has nothing to do with the lecture, but yes. If there, if like us, if the term is extended because there's no election, everybody's extended. Okay. There are many instances where the DGL assigned to our lodge was not present to deliver the monthly Masonic education. This is very true. We've heard, this happens in all terms. The worshipful master had no option but to assign a senior master to do that duty. Whose responsibility is it to make sure of the presence of DGLs during stated meetings? Brethren, this is a very good question. We do have DGLs who, like I said, take the easy path. I'm sorry, take the easy road, not the challenging path. That is my challenge to all of you. Okay, it's very easy to get the office and call yourself very worshipful, and you think that's it. No, you should focus on the roles. And if you don't, ultimately the real loser is you, not the brethren. Now, specifically for this question, junior grand lecturers are required to check that and supervise the DJL in all of their regions, in their respective regions. So if this doesn't happen, the immediate remedies for the worshipful master to assign, like what happens here as senior mason. But okay, the Grand Lodge inspector should bring this up. If there's no inspection yet by the junior grand lecturer, the Grand Lodge inspector should bring it up to or the worshipful master. Either of them should bring it up to the JGL, because it's embarrassing for you to be appointed as a mentor and you're not mentoring. Okay, uh, if you got it solely so that you could get the title, you might think that you got it, but actually you're the real loser. Not just in the eyes of the brethren who judge you on whether you're a true Freemason or not, but in you. That doesn't make you a better Mason. Okay. There are many instances where the DGL's lectures and or carrying out of his responsibilities leaves much to be desired. True. Remember, there are over 200 of them. Okay. What are the exact qualifications of the DGL? I hope you were listening. Those are the three roles that they have to fulfill. Okay. Uh, every leadership team, incoming leadership team, they vet recommendees. It is usually not just the SGL. Okay, because of the number of appointees. Okay, it is the leadership team that vets recommendees. Okay, we we were looking at um, during the centennial term, focusing on providing an academy just for grand lectures. But the reason why we didn't push through with that initiative is there are already a lot of Masonic education initiatives, like for example IMES, right? Maybe as IMES gets more established, as a diploma program gets more established, perhaps the Grand Lodge can think about focusing on having an academy for just for grand lectures, but that's in the future. Right now, we have a wealth of educational opportunities, primarily through IMES. So definitely, every DGL must have a diploma. If you do not have a diploma from IMES, then you cannot be DGL. That's the current qualification. Okay? So I hope I answered that. So no diploma, you cannot be appointed DGL, junior grand lecturer, or senior grand lecturer. Okay? Why the third degree proficiency exam is not a requirement before a brother can enroll? Which one? The IMS diploma? Well, that's because we want to encourage you to, if you look at the amendment, the latest edict, we want to encourage you to attend because you want to listen and participate in the lectures, not because so that it'll be a venue for you to become junior warden, senior warden, and grandmaster. Okay? So, so, so we want you to, that's why we want to encourage you. So I hope I've answered that question. Regarding poll 3, how about cases not involving lodge rituals work? Are you referring to Brother Dumlao on Brother Albert? Are you referring to let me okay, query, yes. Not involving kaya nga, Grand Lodge elections. We have no jurisdiction to talk about Grand Lodge inspections. Okay, so lodge governance and Masonic traditions, okay, and esoteric work, we can talk about that. But if you want to talk about Grand Lodge elections or appointments of Grand Lodge officers, you have to go directly to the Committee on Jurisprudence. Okay, so very clear. I hope that's very clear. And by the way, brethren, you will get this handout. It will be distributed. So you notes after. Right? What is the difference between the examination and the certificate of proficiency of Master Masons and Lodge officers elect? Okay. The certificate of proficiency in the third degree is as to the fact that you passed the examination. Okay? The certificate of proficiency is your proficiency in how to become an officer, how particularly the opening and closing of a lodge, the rules and regulations regarding the norms of lodge governance in general, okay, and also the work, a review of the work. So it's different. They are two separate certifications. Okay, last from very worshipful Kenneth Teng. As historically, how many honorary right worshipful we have? I know of two. I know of Right Worshipful Olivoros and Right Worshipful Nanding Pasqua. Usually SGLs, and usually after what 3 years, 4 years, successive roles, if they don't make Grandmaster, this is a way of the Grand Lodge recognizing them for their service, because it's no joke. It's no joke to be SGL. That's why Right Worshipful Olivares was made honorary deputy Grandmaster, and right now the only living one is Right Worshipful Nanding Pasqua. When you meet him, he's not very worshipful. He's Right Worshipful. That's because I understand he was SGL 3 or 4 times already. He was made in 2010 an honorary deputy grandmaster, and that allows him to be uh, uh, addressed as right worshipful. So I understand there too. I may be wrong. There may be additional other officers who were given that honor. I'm sure there may have been, but I'm not aware. I just know among SGLs there are two. Okay. Okay. So I guess there's a suggestion here about lodge governance. We'll bring that up with the committee on revision of the constitution. Okay. So with that, Kuya Dennis, I think we've finished. Oh, wait, are there two? Are there others? Okay, we finished our questions today.
Thank you very much, Very Worshipful Teddy. I think we got all questions well. I think the lecture today has been very enlightening and very clear. Um, there are others who are asking in the queue in the chat, so you can email Very Worshipful Teddy if you have any concerns. He has his email right now on screen. You can capture it, email it, or if you have other concerns regarding the website or anything at the Grand Lodge site, email us at cos2019@grandlodge.ph and we'll try to address your concerns. Yes, Kuya Teddy.
Very well. Dennis. Can I just highlight two things? You don't have to scribble down all of these lectures. You will get the handouts. They will be distributed via our Viber groups and via Cable To website. Okay. I also want to highlight our next topic this October. We go to Masonic philosophy, and here we get really philosophical. If you like the mini lecture on the Holy Saints John, you're gonna like this October's lecture on Masonic philosophy because we talk about the Masonic initiatic experience. What does it really mean to go through being initiated as an entered apprentice, passed as a fellow craft, and raised as a master mason? What does that really mean? The big picture. We'll talk about the concept and rationale of that. Basically, a very strong pillar of Masonic philosophy in October. So please, by that I mean the really big picture, Freemasonry as an initiatic tradition, uh, the experience. Obviously, we can't talk about the ritual in detail, but we'll just give you a guided tour. And Freemasonry is, in fact, a lifetime journey. So that's what we'll talk about in October, specifically October 21. So if you're interested, brethren, see you then. Thank you very much, Kuya Dennis.
Thank you, Kuya Teddy. Thank you, Very Worshipful Oliver, our AGS.
Kuya Oliver.
Thank you to all those who have joined this webinar this evening. Again, it's our pleasure to be of service to the brethren while we are under this pandemic and while we are in home quarantine. I hope we have enlightened you somehow with the matters regarding the craft. And we're looking forward to seeing you again next month in our October webinar about Masonic philosophy. Okay, the Masonic initiate experience concept and rationale. Again, we would like to thank the Cable To team headed by its editor-in-chief, Kuya Harold Santiago, and its managing editor, Kuya Alberto Dumlao, and its other editorial staff, Kuya Anthony Tan and the others, for taking care of our Facebook live broadcast and also gathering information from there and bringing it here. I think we've reached a big number of brethren as well live on Facebook who are not able to register in this webinar. And to those who have joined us, again, magandang gabi po sa inyo lahat. Kuya Teddy, you can have your dinner now. Thank you very much. It's been a nice
Thank
evening.
you, everyone.
So thank you very much.
21.
See you again soon.
Thank you, Kuya Teddy.
Thank you, Kuya Dennis and Kuya Oliver.
Yeah. Stay safe. Stay safe,
God bless.
everybody. See you all
Good
soon.
night.
Okay. Good night. Bye.